You look like shit. Klaxis immediately recognized Gabe's voice as soon as they walked through the doors. He wore his signature charismatic smile. Gabe was shoving magazines into his plate carrier when he turned back to yell, "Hey shitters! Rocket's back!" Rocket. The breath left Klaxis' lungs. His head started spinning and his heart pounding. That name. His eyes became unfocused as his thoughts were streaming by too fast for him to make sense of anything. He faintly heard the voices of everyone in the room as they started talking loudly. He didn't snap out of it until Shar walked up to him and addressed him directly. "Are you all right? The doc said you'd be under for at least another week," Shar said with a bit of concern in her voice while twisting on a suppressor. "I'm just a bit tired. I'm not exactly supposed to be here, but I felt like I had to," Klaxis said sheepishly. "It's good to see you guys are okay." Klaxis looked around the team room and noticed several new faces staring at him curiously. However, one face was missing, and his heart felt like it wanted to rip itself apart. "Where's Jin?" Klaxis asked hesitantly. The team all stopped their movements at the same time and looked at each other momentarily. A brief moment of silence and hesitation swept through the room. "Got sent back to human space. The idiot lost his legs," Bo said in a monotone voice. Klaxis looked down, gritting his teeth and putting his hand on his head. "I'm sorry, I should've," he said in regret, but he was suddenly cut off by Barbecue. "Don't. It was his fault you're both fucked up. He should have pulled you out sooner," Barbecue said with a snarl on his face. Sergei shrugged and added in his piece. "Yeah, the fucking moron mistimed the impacts, but shit happens sometimes." As the team finished getting all of their gear on, Gabe walked up and handed Klaxis a knife and said, "He wanted you to have this." Klaxis held a surprisingly weighty knife in his hand. He felt the faded brown sheath in his hands. It had a singular button attached to a strap that held it in place at the handle. On the sheath itself it was faded, but held what he assumed was human writing. There was very odd writing on it that he couldn't even remotely begin to understand, but just below it were some of the few human letters he did know. Chungay, UDT, Seal. Just above it was an emblem, a shield with an anchor. A circle with red and blue swirls cutting in half sat atop of it. Stabbing through the circle were ancient human melee weapons, a trident and a sword. Klaxis popped open the button and slowly pulled out the knife. It was well worn and used, but still sharp. Black, 7 inches, 18 centimeters. Long blade came with memories. He held the very blade that drew his blood. By all means, he should hate him. So, why was he happy? Thanks, Gabriel," he choked out. "It's Gabe. Introduce me to your lady friends next time, will ya?" the human said, winking at the two ladies. The two women shifted nervously at suddenly being addressed. Shar laughed and left, walking towards the exit, firmly squeezing Klaxis' shoulder. "Ah, fuck! You fucking asshole!" he yelled out in pain. "You can call me Shar now," she quipped before following Gabe out of the door. "Emperor, save me," he said, rubbing his shoulder. One by one, the team gave their acknowledgments while leaving. Barbecue was the last to finish kitting up before walking up to the Shock Duville. He pointed behind him at a blonde woman in the back sitting with her legs on a table. Klaxis noticed the woman casually lounging. She seemed content with just observing in the background. "Just a heads up, that's our new commander, Colonel Toivonen," Barbecue said before he made his way to the door. "Wait! What happened to Colonel Findlay?" Klaxis shouted out before Barbecue left the building. "He was relieved of his duties. His methods were," the human answered somewhat awkwardly, as he looked between Klaxis and the two women next to him. "Controversial, and it was deemed necessary for a change in leadership, regardless of the results it brought," Barbecue said, trying to give the gentlest answer he could. Loliandra's ears twitched as curiosity got the better of her. "What did he do?" she asked abruptly. Everyone stared at her for a brief moment. Klaxis stared up at her from his wheelchair in shock, his mouth flapping as if he couldn't choose what words to come out. Unlike Liliandra, Elitaria could read the room, and she was horrified at what her friend had just done. Not only did she interrupt a conversation between an Imperial officer and a human senior NCO, it was in view and earshot of a high-ranking human officer. Luli! No! Bad! Elitaria yelled in panic as she wrapped her hands around the insolent private's neck. Liliandra's eyes went wide while her corporal literally started to suffocate her. Everyone else in the room kept staring at the two's antics. Klaxus felt a headache coming over him while watching the antics of his former subordinates. After closing his eyes for a brief second, he chose to reject this current reality and supplant it with his own. The two didn't exist, and Liliandra wasn't currently being murdered behind him. Satisfied with his new reality, he turned back to Barbecue. "It seems a lot has changed since I was indisposed," Klaxus said with a straight face. Barbecue's eyes went from the scene of an act of murder to Klaxus, back to the Tari being strangled, and said, "Shouldn't you do something about this?" Klaxus's eyes twitched, but he maintained his expression. "Don't worry about it." Barbecue raised an eyebrow, then shook his head in derision. "Yeah, a lot has changed around here, but there's not a lot I can talk about, though, unless you're coming back." Barbecue crossed his arms, staring at the Uvil. From outside, the pair could hear Sergei's voice call out, "Dust off in 1 minute! Hurry your slow ass up!" Barbecue adjusted his gear and started to walk outside, but paused. He took one more look at Klaxus and said, "We're hitting the den," before joining the rest of the team. "Wait, what?" Klaxus said in bafflement as the door hissed shut. He turned back around and saw Colonel Toivonen standing right in front of him. Klaxus immediately brought his right hand up to salute, while the colonel stared down at him with an amused smirk smeared across her face. Her deceptively motherly look, radiant blonde hair, and generally gentle features made it almost disarming. If it wasn't for her uniform and symbol denoting her as a colonel, Klaxus would have mistaken her for a visitor or a soldier's spouse. Klaxus was unnerved. Her deep blue eyes enticed you into making a mistake, any mistake that she could exploit. And Klaxus knew that the more cynical approach was more than often the safer option when dealing with their leadership. If Colonel Finley was a predatory hawk, looking to exploit whatever weakness he saw, then Colonel Toivonen was a spider, luring you into her web. "At ease. You don't have to be so formal and tense around me," she said in a small giggle. As he lowered his arm, Klaxus suddenly remembered his entourage. Spinning around, wincing in pain, hoping to see 2 professional soldiers behind him. Fortunately, the sight of Liliandra standing at attention in a salute, with Elitaria giving her a deathly side-eyed stare, put him at ease. "Well, this is a lively group," she said casually with her arms crossed. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Lieutenant Klaxus Zolnak. I heard you're the new commander?" Klaxus introduced himself with a hint of trepidation. Her eyes immediately sharpened and focused on him, sending chills down his spine. "I know who you are, Lieutenant," Colonel Toivonen said softly. "I'm quite surprised you came back here after my—" She looked at the 2 Tauri behind him. "Compatriots' actions," she finished icily. The 2 women shifted uncomfortable under her intense gaze, unsure what to do. It took a while for Klaxus to realize what was being conveyed when he turned around and addressed the 2. "Can you please wait outside?" he asked hesitantly. Liliandra, picking up on his apprehension, was the first to speak up. "Sir, are you sure?" Elitaria immediately cut her off and grabbed her arm and said, "Yes, sir, we'll be right outside," and then proceeded to drag Liliandra outside while giving her a death glare. Just before the doors hissed shut, one could see Elitaria throw her hands towards Liliandra, and an accompanied scream. "Ah!" The colonel laughed softly as she got behind Klaxus's wheelchair and rolled him deeper into the building. "You have lovely soldiers, Lieutenant." She went back to a warmer and softer tone. "I'm unfortunately no longer their commander," Klaxus replied with a tinge of melancholy. Rolling through the team room's lounge, they entered the cage, where weapons, ammo, grenades, and other equipment were stored. Each individual operator had a space with his own assortment of equipment, weapons, and attachments. They eventually rolled past rockets, space, and again his head throbbed after reading the nameplate. His weapon was repaired. His rifle was still leaning against the wall where he last left it, and a ranger tab gently sat upon the shelf. Memories hit him. The suffering, the near starvation, the patrols. He earned that tab. "That's a shame. They're fine soldiers," she replied. Klaxus looked up at her, trying to figure out her angle. Colonel Toivonen's soft expression didn't waver as she looked down at him and gave him a heartwarming smile. I really do apologize on behalf of our entire organization. Findlay has a reputation of conjuring the most objectionable and unsavory strategies, she said with sympathy. The fact it sounded so genuine put him on guard. A crazy thought flashed through Claxus's mind. Is Findlay a weapon? Someone extreme they put in place to carry out extreme operations, and then pull him when he steps on everyone's toes. Claxus dismissed the thought immediately as the two finally entered the commander's office. Rolling him in front of her desk, she casually strode around it to sit in her chair. Now, I have been wondering for a while now, Lieutenant Zolnak, why are you here? She asked with genuine curiosity. Claxus opened his mouth to check on his team, but the answer caught in his throat. His heart started to pound as he realized what just went through his head. Wait a minute. His team? The world started to slow down around him as he started finding new details about the room he was in. Tick, 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 tick. A round, time-counting device was behind the colonel, as she put her hands up to her chin and leaned on them. Each second was ticking away as if it was counting down to something. He remembered in one of those ancient human movies about bomb defusal. I heard they were attacking the den, and... He gulped and answered before Colonel Tyvonen cut him off. I'm sorry. That's classified information only available to those that need to know. She rejected him flatly. He was dumbfounded. What did she mean? Classified. He and his team took part in that operation. Ma'am, with all due respect, I was part of that mission. I think I deserve to know how this is going to end. He tried to say amicably, but he could feel the annoyance build within him. The woman smiled. And we appreciate your assistance as our partner force liaison, but unfortunately, this information is only available to our teams. She again rejected him. Tick, 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 tick. Claxus had experienced an insurmountable number of trials that tested his patience throughout his life, and each trial he defeated. From the incessant berating and demands from drill instructors in cadet school, to the pompous and racist arrogance of divine tutors, he had endured. But the woman in front of him, she was pushing buttons he didn't even know he had. What the fuck does she mean by partner force? He screamed in his own mind. He was losing control, and those words were like a lash across his back. He suffered and starved to get that tab, the shit they put him through and the work he put in to earn it, to earn a place on the teams. Claxus not only nearly lost his arm, but was required to go through intensely painful therapy. For what? For some random woman to swoop in, kick him out, and say he was never part of them? Are you serious? I was the one that made survival for that entire op possible! He shouted at her. The colonel's hands folded on top of the table, and she started tapping away with a nail on her finger. Each tap of her nail synced perfectly with each tick of the clock. Claxus didn't realize it, but with both sounds happening at the same time, his anxiety started screaming at him. I'm sorry, Lieutenant, but to know what's going on with my teams, you have to be part of my teams, she said almost mockingly. Her teams? White-hot rage flashed across his face. What the fuck do you mean your teams? I am in the fucking teams, you fucking bitch! He screamed as he slammed his hands down on the desk. Are you now? She asked as a creeping smile stretched across her face, as if she caught someone in a trap. Well, Lieutenant Claxus Zolnak, why is it you think you belong in human special operation detachments? She asked in an almost coaxing way. Tick, 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 tick. Weren't you just a temporary attachment? She asked innocently. Claxus was taken aback by what she just said. He couldn't refute it. The woman leaned in across the desk, her eyes burning a hole through his. Why are you so insistent so much on being part of this team, Lieutenant Claxus? She said with him hanging on every word. Don't you want to wash your hands of us? Say your goodbyes and go back to your old unit, the colonel continued. Or did you really become a human operator? Did you really become Rocket? The words leaving her mouth caused his world to nearly stop. Rocket started breathing heavily when the colonel started to press him for an answer. No! He was Klaxis, and he was supposed to be done with these humans. That's why he wanted to come, right? To get closure, because Rocket was dead. Or was Klaxis dead? He started to hyperventilate, his good arm reaching for his heart. So much pressure. His heart felt like it was going to implode and explode at the same time. He could feel each beat and felt like a hammer slamming into his chest like a machine gun. I think I know why you're here, she said, half giggling. Klaxis was in fight-or-flight mode. The claws on his good hand were digging into the top of the desk, and his eye locked onto the woman as he tunnel-visioned. Colonel Tyvonen slowly opened a drawer and pulled out a single encrypted Imperial datapad. She gently placed it on the desk and slid it towards him. Imperial Galactic Military, Permanent Personnel Transfer Request, First Lieutenant Klaxis, Rocket, Zolnak. From Imperial Galactic Ground Forces 10th Army, 1st Legion, 5th Division, 3rd Regiment, 2nd Battalion. To Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command. Redacted, classified. Redacted, classified. Redacted, classified. Pending transferee approval. First Lieutenant Klaxis, Rocket, Zolnak. Biological signature required. Approval granted by Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Detachment Commander. Redacted, classified. Biological signature granted. Approval granted by Imperial Ground Forces Commander of the 10th Army. Imperial High Marshal Avadi Tsosori. Biological signature granted. Time stopped as he held the datapad in his hand. Clarity finally came to his mind. He had made his choice. Klaxis allowed the device to scan his eye. First Lieutenant Klaxis, Rocket, Zolnak. Biological signature granted. It was this moment he realized Klaxis had been dead this entire time. He was Rocket now. The colonel smiled and took the datapad from his hands. Welcome to the eyes, Rocket, she said with a genuine smile on her face. And so, Rocket vomited.